Support for Audacious with Chion Wolf provided by a generous contribution from Suzanne Hopgood in memory of Frank Lord.
From Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford, this is Audacious. I'm Chion Wolf. Here is a truth underneath everything you're about to hear. The amount that you love and are devoted to your child has zero effect on the likelihood that you may unintentionally forget them in the car. In the United States, about 38 children die in hot cars each year. That's according to research published by the nonprofit kidsandcars.org. Their caregivers are from all financial backgrounds, races, ages, from every profession and education level. And the statistics weren't always this extreme. Since the 1990s, after children were moved to the backseat to protect them from front seat airbags, rightfully so, deaths involving children unknowingly left in hot cars have increased exponentially. In the past 40 years, Kids and Car Safety has documented more than 1,000 child hot car deaths in the United States, and at least another 7,500 children who survived, but with varying degrees of injury. Now, I want to acknowledge that we at Audacious are drawn to difficult stories, but this one feels challenging on a primal level. So please take care of yourself as you listen and after it's over. This episode includes descriptions of death, grief, and suicidal thoughts, but if a life can be saved or a devastated family can be held by their community with a lot more compassion and understanding, we believe it is worth the discomfort. Also woven throughout this episode is an extraordinary amount of love. Later in the show, we meet Stephanie Salvilla. In July 2009, her 5-month-old son, Gannon, died after she unknowingly left him in her hot car. She'll talk about what happened that day, what came after, and what she wishes more people understood about grief, human error, and judgment. But first, Amber Rollins is the executive director of Kids and Car Safety. That's the nonprofit that tracks child vehicle-related deaths and injuries and supports affected families. The organization advocates for better safety technology and policies to prevent these tragedies. Amber helps us understand the brain science behind how any caregiver might forget about a child in the back seat of a car. I asked Amber to tell me how something like this happens.
What we know is that there is science behind this. And this is kind of a complex description, so stay with me. But there's 2 different parts of our brain that control memory. You have your hippocampus, which controls your here and now memory. That is the thing that controls your ability to stop and get milk on the way home from work. And then you have the basal ganglia, which is your habit memory. And this is the part of your brain that controls what you're doing when you're functioning in what we commonly refer to as autopilot mode. So basal ganglia, when you're stressed out, sleep deprived, takes over, especially if you've started emotion or something that is a habit routine that you can go back and grab from and then not have to think about. So driving from home to work is a habit memory. You don't have to think about where to turn. You don't use your GPS. Habit memory kicks in and it takes you from home to work. If daycare drop-off isn't part of that normal routine, you can literally lose awareness of the child in the back seat and go straight from home to work without ever realizing you missed that drop-off because your basal ganglia has taken over and performed a habit. The basal ganglia is a reptilian part of your brain that really is not as sophisticated as the prospective memory, and it can't account for a change in routine. So when all of the right circumstances align and basal ganglia has taken over, that's how a loving, responsible parent can absolutely have no idea they missed that drop-off.
So somebody's maybe understandably sleep deprived because they've got a couple-month-old baby in the back, and then when there's a partner involved, there's coordinating with them, and your brain is all over the place. Is that a common story?
Yeah, it is. And, I can explain how this happens because it happened to me. I never left my child in the car, but 12 years into this job and really being a globally sought out expert on this issue, I kind of believed it wouldn't happen to me because of all I know. It's always on my mind. And nothing could be further from the truth. And I learned that firsthand. My son was 3 months old. I was, extremely sleep deprived. He had just started going to daycare. I'd been on maternity leave for 3 months. The week before he started daycare. My older daughter had a sleepover. I took her friend home. I've done that, 500 times before that day. And what I always did after that was go home. So I dropped her off. I get to the end of the cul-de-sac and I was supposed to turn right to go to daycare. And instead I turned left to go home and work. And I had completely lost awareness that he was back there in a rear-facing car seat. I couldn't see him. And I just drove. And luckily for me, he made a screeching sound. And I immediately knew. I pulled over and I was hysterical because I knew I'd forgotten him. I had no idea he was back there. Me, the person who spends every day telling people this can happen to you. And it truly wasn't until that moment that I knew for sure this could happen to anybody.
Thank you for sharing that. And I bet that this happens all the time and people don't talk about it. They feel ashamed or like they can't even imagine bringing this up because if you even suggest that you may have for a moment forgotten your child, I mean, I can't wrap my head around the stigma a parent might experience.
Yeah, we have people reach out to us privately all the time and say, oh my gosh, this happened to me. I'm never going to trust myself again. How could I go on caring for my children and they live with this guilt and this just like awful, icky feeling that they're horrible. And the reality is we all have the same human brains that are fallible and it could happen to anybody.
Now, this episode focuses specifically on cases where a parent or a caregiver leaves a child unintentionally and unknowingly, not cases involving deliberate neglect or abuse. Can you help us understand the different categories of hot car deaths and how common these memory-related tragedies are?
Yeah, so about 54% of hot car deaths of children in the United States happen when a parent or caregiver unknowingly leaves the child. These are those situations where they lose awareness and a lot of times they go to daycare at the end of the day to pick them up. And that's when they find out they never dropped them off. And most of those cases are a missed daycare drop-off. There is another small percentage of those cases where it was a miscommunication between two adults in the car. So this is typically a situation where we're coming home, we've got multiple children, there's a lot of things to get out of the car, everybody's kind of moving in different directions, and each adult thinks the other one brought the baby in and put the baby down for a nap. And so then an hour or two goes by, and they go to check on the baby and they realize the baby's not there. And by the time they find him, it's too late. And then there's another small percentage of that where it's a child care provider that left the child. So like a daycare van driver or, something similar. About 25% of hot car deaths happen when a child sneaks out of the house, gets into a car on their own, and is then unable to get back out. Then finally, there's a subset of cases that are the most difficult because these are cases where somebody knew they were leaving the child. It's about 15% of cases. And they're not situations where that person was trying to be neglectful or harm the child. It's typically a situation where baby's sleeping and they're like, oh, what's the number one rule? We don't like a sleeping baby. And so they leave the baby in the car, they go inside, then they might get distracted and forget that they're out there. Really, the overwhelming majority are unknowingly left.
I hate this question, but I know it's temperature dependent, but how long does it take possibly for a child to die who's been left in a hot car?
That is a hard question. And there's not really a single answer for it. A lot of factors go into play here. How hydrated was the child at the time? What were they wearing? Were they in a car seat? That car seat acts like extra insulation, traps in heat pretty badly. Were the windows tinted? How humid was it outside? Just so many factors, even down to like the color of the outside and interior of the car. Was it asphalt or white pavement? These all play a factor. But what we know is that in a higher temperature situation, a child can lose their life in a mere matter of minutes. Literally minutes can be the difference between life or death or even severe brain damage and disability for the rest of their life.
That was Amber Rollins. She's the executive director of Kids and Car Safety. She'll rejoin us later to talk about simple ways to protect kids from being left behind in cars. Before we talk with Stephanie Salvilla about what happened to 5-month-old Gannon, she wants you to know that he was and is so deeply loved. And she wants you to know what kind of person she was before a change in routine turned her world upside down.
I was a cheerleader. I was class president. I was school president. I was, homecoming queen. I went to graduate school. I got a job. I got engaged. I had a career. I got a house. I got married, all in the right, I'm in Gen X, all in the right order. I saved for 3 years, all my vacations, so I could have, I think, 16 weeks of maternity leave because it wasn't paid. So, I've always been one of these people that is organized. I give things great thought. I always, have worked on doing things the right way.
Before she describes that terrible day, I asked Stephanie to tell me what Gannon was like.
I'll tell you what the ladies at daycare said. The ladies at daycare said they would joke around with me, that they would carry Gannon and rub his arm on all the babies at daycare because they wanted a little bit of Gannon's goodness to rub off all the other babies because he was the best baby that they had there. Because he was from the beginning, he had the best nights. In the mornings, there was no crying. He had this little toy on the crib that he could hit with his feet and it would make noise. And that's how I knew he was awake, because he would wake up and he would scoot down to that toy area, just kick it. And the mobile would go around and it would play. And it was just, he was really the most amazing child. And one time we were at Home Depot and Mackenzie was jumping and making Gannon laugh. And he was laughing. It was echoing in the Home Depot. And this lady came and she goes, "I can hear your baby laughing on the other side of the building." And I had to come see what he was laughing about because his laugh is so amazing. He truly was a great baby. He was a great kid and very happy.
In the middle of a Florida summer in 2009, Stephanie was running on very little sleep. She'd been waking up to feed Gannon at 1 and 5 a.m. for months. Mackenzie, her 5-year-old daughter, had been sick that week. Everything about her family's routine was off. I asked Stephanie to take me back to the hour before her family changed forever.
My husband put the kids in the car and he put the bottles in the back seat, which was not my normal process. I always, I knew about off-cart deaths. I had talked to him about it because we're in Florida, but the bottles got put in the back seat and I didn't want to. I was just so excited because it was such a good morning. I didn't really say anything because I was just so happy about it. And our car was just quiet. Everybody was tired. Mackenzie was still recovering from her eye infection. So we pulled off at her daycare. We all got out. I always brought Gannon in. And I remember Mackenzie, I got so frustrated with her because, there's this long line of parents putting their kids in through the gate. And she stopped after she went through the gate the first time and turned around so no one else could get through. And she hugged Gannon again for a second time. And I was like, "Mackenzie," because, there was another dad trying to get in. And then Gannon and I got in the car. And the next thing I know, I see my parking space. I'm in my parking space. I see the tree. I'm going through my mental list. I dropped Mackenzie off. I got frustrated. I saw her, giving Gannon the second kiss. And I handed Gannon over to his daycare man. I could tell you that she was wearing a green shirt. The color of the room, it was all correct. It was an actual previous memory that my brain inserted to make up for the lost space. And I fell for it. I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. I handed him over to her and the baby bottles, And I didn't realize when I went to work that I was a little early on the clock, but I know now that day I was early. And, I was talking to my girlfriend about Gannon, and we were talking about whose daycare was better. And the next day, Friday, I was going to have the day off because I was going to take them to one of those water fountains. So he was on my brain all day long, but I had dropped him off. Like I said, I dropped him off.
You had the memory of dropping him off.
I had the memory, and to this day, it's probably, I don't know, it might be one of those things that's saved me, is that I have that memory that I dropped him off. I mean, I know that I did the best that I absolutely could. And, when it comes to fighting with your brain, you're going to lose. You're going to lose. And I lost that day, and I lost Gannon. And then at the end of work, I was walked out to my car, and I got into my car seat. There were no bottles because the bottles were in the back seat. And I looked into my rearview mirror and I saw him. And it didn't register at first. And then I looked again. And that's when I started screaming. And my coworker, he heard me screaming. And we opened up my back door. And I knew what had happened. And I knew I'd lost him. That it was my fault.
It sounds like an impossible thing to process. I can't imagine even all these years later you've fully processed it. When I think about traumatic experiences, I think about voltage in the body and in the heart and in the soul. And I would be interested in hearing what that voltage felt like in those early moments.
You're not capable of processing what's happening. Just the devastation of everything, everything you've worked for, carrying your child for 9 months and losing him at 5 months. You just can't register that in your head. And working so hard as a parent, as an employee, as a working woman, as a working parent, to completely fail in your life journey, it's a complete breakage of everything. It's a breakage of your presence. It's a breakage of your future. Your future's never going to be the same. When I got pregnant and I found out that Gannon was a boy, my daughter Mackenzie was so excited because in our house at the time, it was me and my husband and our 2 dogs. And our dogs were a pair. And so everybody had a pair. Everybody had a match except my daughter. And she was so excited to have her pair in this world, to be able to have your match in this world, someone to walk with, and to be the person responsible for bringing that into fruition, but also ended up being the person to take that away. One time, I don't know, it was probably 6 months after Gannon had passed, Mackenzie and I were out shopping. And, she was 5 years old at the time. we weren't talking about Gannon at all. We were just walking and shopping. But obviously it was in her head, ruminating around. And she grabbed my hand and she said, I forgive you over Gannon. I forgive you over Gannon. I mean, to know that was carrying space in my 5-year-old daughter's head, and for her to have the presence to grab my hand and say it out loud, it was one of those moments. It was hard.
Will you talk about what happened right after? I imagine the next 24 hours were a blur, but what do you remember?
I was taken to the police station and interviewed. As police officers, they were pretty upset about the whole situation. They were not kind during the interview, but they were very kind afterwards. There was an investigation with Child Services to determine if Mackenzie could stay with us and, what kind of parent I was. I remember showing them my baby food, as I was making homemade baby food at the time. And I was, showing them the baby food. You always start off with the peas, peaches and peas. And I was showing them the diapers and where I kept everything. Luckily, they did write a report, a favorable report. So there were no issues with Child Services regarding that. I was charged with leaving a child in the car, causing great bodily harm. So I had to hire a lawyer. When we went to court, I guess the way to explain is that my case was adjudicated and postponed, and I was on probation for 5 years. I guess if I had no future arrests and nothing about that, then after my 5-year probation, the case would be closed. So I was on probation for 5 years and, went every month to my probation officer. He would stop by the house and I would explain to Mackenzie that he was a friend from work that was coming to visit, having it. I wasn't able to explain that well to my daughter. And my husband left 2 weeks after the court case. I think our court case was in December. And he told me he was leaving about 4 days before Christmas. So in February, he moved out. But he said some really cruel things. And I realized it was best for me and Mackenzie to allow this process to happen. I was suicidal for a long time, and I knew I needed to get help when I thought about driving me and Mackenzie off of a bridge. That was my breaking point when I was considering taking Mackenzie with me. And so Mackenzie and I were in therapy. And my boss and I decided that I needed to take a break from my career and concentrate on myself and Mackenzie. So she and I moved to Virginia. We lived there for 4 or 5 years. And when I was ready, I came back down to here in Orlando.
In the days, months, years after, what is a reaction or an action or some words that you always needed but never got?
Oh, one thing that was hard for me was the insecurity of having to meet new people and explain my history and having to experience their awkward reaction. Part of making friendships is you're opening up yourself and understanding. And so sometimes having to experience the other person's awkwardness is hard.
What would be a reaction that would be helpful to you?
A hug? I guess a hug.
That was Stephanie Salvilla in 2009. During a week of disrupted routines and very little sleep, she unknowingly left her 5-month-old son, Gannon, in the car where he died. When we get back, Stephanie talks about why she decided to share her story.
I just feel like it's my responsibility to expose myself and expose my emotions so I could get the parent that doesn't think it'll happen to them to see that even the best of us risk this tragedy.
I'm Chion Wolf. This is Audacious. Stay with me. This is Audacious. I'm Chion Wolf. Today's episode is asking us to hold a reality that most people don't ever want to think about. That love does not make a parent immune to making a mistake with irreversible consequences. Stephanie Salvilla knows what that feels like. In 2009, her 5-month-old son, Gannon, died after she unknowingly left him in a hot car. This next section doesn't return to the details of that day, but it does stay close to the emotional aftermath. There are still a lot of tears and love here, so please keep taking care of yourself as you listen. I wonder, because there are plenty of people who've lost a sibling, a parent, a spouse, a child. There are too many, but there aren't very many people who've been in your position. And so I'm curious what it felt like for you the first time you met another parent who knows what it feels like to go through what you went through.
It's a nuclear bomb. It's devastating. It's the colliding of grief between two people. It's a little dangerous because it's so immense. It's uncontrollable. It's uncontrolled. It's relief. You know, we have love for our children. We have unexpressed love, hope, shame, guilt, grief, frustration, and anger, you know, all rolled up into this event. And to meet another parent at the beginning is just a floodgate of emotions and a sharing of grief. You know, those women that helped me, they're all from different backgrounds. One was an accountant. One was former military. Another one was a psychology professor. And so they all gave me different aspects on adjusting and dealing with grief that I really needed. The lady, Lynn, with the military background, she told me, she said, put a towel in the car and cry in it, but you got to put your bootstraps on. You know, you've got to get to work. You've got to take care of your family, you know, get through this court case, you know. And then the psychologist, you know, we would talk about my grief and terrible thoughts in your head about yourself. You know, I couldn't look into a mirror for 6 years. I couldn't look into a mirror without saying, you idiot, you know. You know, you go into the bathroom at work, you can't look into the mirror, you know, or get upset. Every time you walk to your car, I kept my car for the longest. It was the last thing I had, you know. I kept that car till the engine block broke. And I considered pulling the back seat out. You know, because it's one of the last things that you have of that life. And you try to hold on to it.
As we've been preparing for this conversation, I just want you to know that you and everyone who's ever been through this are on my mind and my heart And this feels so important because I think about, of course, the lives that have been lost and the families that have had to go through this and unfortunately will have to go through this. But I also think a lot about the uncountable, untrackable amount of parents who have forgotten their child in the car. But because they found their child in time, they don't tell anybody.
No,
They don't talk about it.
they don't.
I imagine that they may not even tell their spouse about it because they need to be trusted with this child and nothing bad happened and they caught it in time. And so we don't talk about it. And I want to understand at what point you thought, I have to talk about this.
I guess because I have a high tolerance, not really caring what people think about me. I knew that it could be one of my responsibilities to be someone who uses myself to get this subject more exposure, so people understand that. I mean, this happens to the best of people with the most amazing intentions of walking this world down the right path. And it also happens to the parents who are struggling. It can happen to anybody at any time. And I just feel like it's my responsibility to expose myself and expose my emotions so I could get the parent that doesn't think it'll happen to them to see that even the best of us risk this tragedy.
I'm curious how this lives in your everyday, like talking about it. Of course, you're here with me to talk about it for this show, and I'm so grateful. But the other day, there's a playground where I park when I go for long bike rides. And the other day, and I've been researching this show and thinking about you. And as I was getting my bike ready, this minivan pulls up and this mom gets out of the front seat and goes to the back seat and takes her infant out. And all I want to do is say, hey, I know you're a great mom, but I just want to let you know. And then I didn't know what else to say in my internal monologue. And I didn't say anything. But it made me wonder what it's like for you when you're in a parking lot and you see a mom get her child out of the back seat. Do you ever say anything? If so, what do you say?
You know, I'm not sure because I don't know if we live in a society that accepts that type of behavior.
Yeah, I was thinking if I said anything to her, she would probably get defensive, right?
Yeah,
Because people still think that it's a matter of, well, I love my child, and so therefore this could never happen to me.
right. Oh, yeah, I heard that lots on the articles that were written about me. But I guess I can't reach everybody individually. So I hope, like with interviews like NPR, people are driving. I think that, I would like to do more radio interviews. People are driving in the car, listening to the radio. Radio is still one of the most important communications that we have.
I agree.
Everyone hears stories. They might not get the full impact when they read the story.
In what ways now do you feel, Gannon, the strongest?
At night, when I'm laid in bed, a lot of the parents in my group will talk about what the kids are doing up in heaven. When Gannon died, he wasn't crawling. And Mackenzie was beside herself that Gannon was stuck in a cloud, not being able to crawl. And so as a parent, I told Mackenzie that Gannon got a new body. He's like 7 years old and he's playing soccer, And so another mother and I, we would talk about that the kids, were playing soccer, or, her daughter Jenna was aggravating Gannon. So you make up this world to cope with your grief. when I cook dinner, sometimes I'll do these double takes and like he's beside me watching dinner because he'd be 17 years old, hungry, wanting to know what's for dinner. Or when I'm sitting on the sofa. A lot of times when I'm sitting on the sofa by myself, I feel his presence hanging out with me.
Do you believe in God?
It's funny. Religion was not important for me before Gannon passed, but I needed it for Mackenzie to explain to her where Gannon was, that I needed it, that Gannon was somewhere. I realized that if there was a God, he cannot fix things on earth, obviously, because if he could, this wouldn't have happened, And so it made me accept the other tragedies in this world that we all get upset with, that there might not be this God that's this controlling God, but there might be this energy is neither created nor destroyed. And our energy goes into the wind, the sunlight, energy to push, signs towards us. So I guess that's what I believe, that, he's still here. He's still around. I just can't touch or see him. I feel like I feel him, and I have conversations with him.
What are those conversations like?
Wishing that he was here. How much I miss him. But how much I wish things weren't the way they are.
When you think about the possibility of life after death and seeing him again, what do you think the first thing is you'd say to him?
I did my best. Obviously, it wasn't good enough. But I was sorry. But I'm glad to see you now. And let's go hang out.
What do you think he would say to that?
I know. He would say, I know.
That was Stephanie Salvilla. In 2009, her 5-month-old son, Gannon, died in a hot car when she drove to work instead of daycare, unknowingly making a catastrophic mistake. After the break, Stephanie reflects on the lasting impact she hopes Gannon's memory will have on families everywhere.
I would really like technology in a car for all the children's legacy.
Plus, Amber Rollins is back to share some simple habits that can make a difference for anyone who drives with kids.
The neuroscientists and memory experts we work with say that is the number one tip, because you have to have some kind of obvious clue or reminder to snap you out of that autopilot, and then you can function from there.
I'm Chion Wolf. This is Audacious. Stay tuned. This is Audacious. I'm Chion Wolf. We're back with Stephanie Salvilla. In 2009, she unknowingly left her 5-month-old Gannon in the car where he died. She had a supportive, loving community who held her, and they continue to. She was fortunate in that sense. Some parents experience no support at all, or worse. To honor Gannon, Stephanie now speaks publicly about what happened, hoping her story might help save a child's life and protect a family from knowing the kind of grief that she knows. Back to our conversation. This is kind of a weird question, but it hit me right before we connected. As we go throughout our days, we do this inventory of what's going wrong and right in our lives, right? We try to be grateful for what we have and our health and everything, and then inevitably we think about what's missing or the mistakes we've made or the things that annoy us. When you are in the vicinity of someone who is deeply perturbed by something that you, in particular, may view as trivial. I imagine you wanting to shake them by the shoulders and say, you have no idea what suffering and pain is. Do you ever feel that way, or am I projecting?
No. You are right on. And I think it probably stems from feeling sorry for yourself and jealousy. I don't want to be like this, but it's hard to experience what I've experienced and not feel some level of anger towards everybody else's lives, and it's hard, when you've had so much support with your friends and stuff, but you still experience that comparing yourself to those same people who've given you so much support. Your grief just becomes so great that you're just angry at yourself that you let this happen, and you let this happen to your daughter. What's going on in my daughter's head when she sees, her friend with her brother.
What is your relationship like with her now?
It's amazing. We're BFFs. And she's 22. And no, we have an amazing relationship. We're very open. We live on the structure of openness, no judging. We're very cognizant on making sure we're always on the same page. We get along really well.
Hearing what your life is like now, of course, with your daughter, Mackenzie, and with your advocacy and your relentless pursuit of educating people about this, it makes me think about how, in some ways, you're the same Stephanie you've always been. But I'd like to know, in what ways is your wiring different 17 years after his death than the day before? How are you different?
I have a 50-foot high wall that's 10 feet deep. I'm not as outgoing as I used to be. I'm much more reserved and definitely not as happy. Happy people, they have that aura around them.
A lightness.
A lightness. I am definitely not like that. My daughter tells me I don't have a sense of humor.
As you laugh.
As I laugh. But there's more path in front of me. Definitely not the path I wanted, but it's the path that I got. And I'm going to try to make the most out of it, that my emotions will allow me.
I want to ask, what brings you the most joy these days?
Oh, being with my daughter. Last Saturday, we went to the beach. Last night, we did a little full moon thing.
Full moon ritual?
Yeah. And looking at, the wind blow through a tree. It's a moment where you can see that life is going on. And you have to accept that, or you'll crumble. A lot of parents in this grief don't make it, or they don't make it well. That was one of the things about me, is I couldn't allow the grief to completely consume me, because I have to be responsible for Mackenzie. I have to be responsible to the rest of my family.
So if Mackenzie wasn't in the picture, it would be a very different aftermath for you.
Oh, absolutely. I would be a much more hateful person. And I don't know if I would be the type of person to do outreach. Having Mackenzie makes me want to help people. Having Gannon makes me want to help people. Help keep another child alive.
In that spirit, I'd like to close out our conversation by asking what you hope Gannon's legacy is.
I would really like technology in a car. I would really want that for all the children's legacy. A reprogramming, just a 5-minute reprogram in the daycare applications that daycares buy for an 8:30 report, and the front desk person can start making phone calls. It's simple. It is ridiculously simple. I know some people worry about, well, the liability if someone forgets to write the report. It's an easy fix. It's such a ridiculously easy fix.
To just call if the kid didn't show up.
And it'll save a life. Let's save a life. Let's save a life today. That's what I would like to be the legacy is. Let's make a change. Let's fix it.
Is there anything we didn't talk about that I want to make sure when you click off this Zoom call, you feel like we've covered? I know we could also talk for 18 hours. Is there anything I missed that you want to make sure you say?
Just that I was a pretty good parent. I still am a pretty good parent. Good employee, a great friend. I'm a great friend.
I can tell.
This happens to everyday normal people trying to adult it in this world. I thought I had it together. I had a protocol, and I don't want to sound dismal, and despite the fact that I had a protocol, it still failed, but communication with your family and your spouse is so important in making sure everyone's in step and everyone knows what's going on. You don't have to carry the load on yourself. Just communicate. But yeah, I think we've covered most all of it.
Well, Stephanie, Salvilla, I'm so deeply sorry for your loss, and I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this. It's been a great opportunity.
Now we turn back to Amber Rollins. She's the executive director of Kids and Car Safety. That's the only national nonprofit focused solely on preventing child deaths and injuries in and around vehicles. Now, Amber says that the most common alerts in cars these days are helpful but imperfect. They remind you to look, but they don't necessarily know that a child is there. The better technology can detect tiny movements in the back seat, but it's still rare, and the federal rule meant to require rear seat alerts is overdue. But while the system moves much too slowly, grief does not wait. There are families, whole communities living inside the aftermath of a preventable car death. And about 50% of the time, Amber says the caregiver is charged with a crime. What exactly are those charges?
All over the place. I mean, it's really unpredictable what is going to happen. There tend to be states that seem to be more harsh. Florida, Virginia are just two that pop into my mind, especially Florida is very harsh, even when it's obvious that this is a total accident. And this is just a really bad deal. This is not what our justice system is for. The punishment they put on themselves is worse than anything anybody could put on them. They believe they belong in a jail cell for the rest of their life, but they're in their own hell. I can promise you that. And the parents that we work with, I think, tend to do better because they find an outlet, right? They're able to do something to honor them and bring meaning to such a horrible thing. But the things that happen socially, I mean, the public is so nasty and so judgmental to these parents. They get death threats. The reporters are camped out on their front yard. They're sharing pictures of their children from Facebook. All in these moments where they're just trying to grieve the loss of their baby. A lot of times, Child Protective Services finds them negligent, and in almost every single case. I've never heard of a parent that's appealed that actually got that revoked. So they're on the child abuse registry the rest of their lives. They'll never be able to volunteer at their children's school. They'll never be able to adopt. I mean, the consequences are serious. Felony charges and all the different outcomes of, being a felon. People have lost their professional licenses and jobs and not been able to find jobs again in their communities. Family members turn on them because they don't understand. They lose their living children and the ability to see them. I mean, the ripple effect of something that was not perceived and not known, it wasn't a conscious choice, is just unbelievable and cruel the way these parents are treated.
In your experience, what kind of support has been the most helpful?
The number one thing that I hear from people that we work with is that peer connection with another mom or another dad who's been through this. And it's very difficult. It's very scary. There's a lot of complicated feelings around it. They don't want to put their grief on somebody else who's been through this. And they're scared. They don't know if they can handle the other person's grief. But if you can find the strength to do it, if there's somebody out there listening who's been through this and they are wondering if they can do it, just do it. Do it. Put one foot in front of the other and call us and we'll get you connected with somebody because it truly will help you.
I imagine when people hear stories like we're going to hear in this show and that you've shared with us, they think, all right, yeah, but that would never happen to me. What's a more realistic and helpful way for people to think about prevention in their everyday lives with everything else they have on their plate as parents?
Yeah.
What's a better way to think about this?
First of all, if you are one of those people who's thinking this isn't going to happen to me, I would just really strongly encourage you to do one thing. Get online and read the article Fatal Distraction. It's a Pulitzer Prize winning article. Everybody who's ever read that article comes out of that knowing, okay, yeah, I get it now. And then, parents, there's a couple of very easy things that you can do in your everyday life, habits you can create to prevent this from happening. So number one, look before you look. And what that means is open the back door, look in the back seat every time you leave your vehicle. Once you do something for 20 or, more days, it's a habit. You don't ever have to think about it again. You just do it. I also put my cell phone and my handbag in the back seat. That's just like a double cross check. If I walk away from my car and I don't have my phone, guaranteed I'm going to have to access it for something in the next 5 minutes. Just guaranteed. The other thing we tell parents is grab an old stuffed animal that no one cares about, put it in the backseat of your car. This is going to be your reminder buddy. And anytime you buckle baby into the car, you grab that stuffy and you bring it up to the front seat and you put it in your lap as a visual and physical cue that they're with you. And the neuroscientists and memory experts we work with say that that is the number one tip because you have to have some kind of visual, physical, obvious clue or reminder to snap you out of that autopilot and bring you back into that here and now where okay, who's with me? What am I doing? And then you can function from there.
Yeah, and it's not because you don't love your baby, you aren't obsessed with your baby. It's not because you think anything like this could possibly happen. It's just because your brain is fallible. Also, you are a parent. Your brain's mush in there, is what I hear.
100%. You'll never be the same. Once you have kids, you'll never be the same. And try as you might, you can't prevent this from happening just by thinking it won't happen to you. I can't tell you how many parents I've talked to who are living with this the rest of their lives. And they will tell me, I knew this could happen, but never in a million years did I think it would happen to me because I love them so much. But love can't save this from happening.
Before I let you go, I have to ask what this work does to you and for you.
That's a hard question. Some days this work destroys me, if I'm being completely honest. I would say everybody on our team cries a lot. And we also are just filled with being able to do this. Our hearts are full being able to watch a parent walk through the worst moments of their lives. I'm crying just talking about it. And then watching them grow and find their strength and honor their child and do something positive and go to Capitol Hill and speak in front of Congress. I mean, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And then hearing from somebody who says, I learned tips from you and my child's still with me. That's what it's all about.
How do you take care of yourself?
Well, I do a lot of running. I play with my plants a lot. But honestly, doing this work takes care of me. It is hard, and some days it destroys me, and some days I just want to scream, and I do. But then the next day's okay. And, you bring yourself back and you remind yourself that this has to happen. If kids in car safety cease to exist, nobody else is doing anything about this. We've been leading the way on this issue for 30 years and all the other issues that we've solved with technology, with product redesign. I'll give you the best example ever, and that is trunk entrapment. So our president and founder was kidnapped. It was Halloween weekend. These guys snuck under the door with ski masks on. They shoved her and her husband in the trunk of the car. They put their 9-month-old baby who was in his car seat, they just threw him into the front yard and they drove away. Meanwhile, they have no idea what's happening to him. They didn't know if he was dead or, being tortured or whatever. And they left him in the middle of a field to die in the trunk of that car. They escaped and they lived to tell the tale. But Jeanette worked and worked and worked and worked and finally was successful at getting trunk releases required in all cars. And not one single person has died in the trunk of a car that has a trunk release since then. That is the power of what you can do when you collect the data, when you have the data, when you have the stories of the families that have been so deeply impacted by this, and you put those two things together, and then you come up with a solution. It costs 3 cents per vehicle. I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Well, Amber Rollins, thank you so much for talking with me and for all you do.
Thank you so much for having me and for, the heart that you and your team have had. It's very clear that you are an extremely compassionate group and nobody better suited to tell this story. I really feel that from you guys and I appreciate that.
When you go to ctpublic.org/audacious, you'll find a link to the great work done by Amber and her team at Kids and Car Safety. They've got prevention tips, family stories, national data, and resources for anyone affected by vehicle-related tragedies. And we'll link you to the Pulitzer Prize-winning article that Amber mentioned, Fatal Distraction, by Jean Weingarten. A very special thank you to Audacious producer Jessica Severin DeMartinez. There wasn't one meeting we had about this episode that didn't include her tears, and the amount of research and stories she read to make sure we were able to be fully present for our guests and to serve you listening. It was a lot. Jessica, thank you for putting your whole heart into this work. Always. We had help from Meg Fitzgerald, the Senior Manager of Projects and Radio Programming, and thoughtful oversight from Robin Doyon-Aitken. She's the Deputy Director of Storytelling at Connecticut Public Radio here in Hartford. Your thoughts, your stories are always welcome. Send us an email, audacious@ctpublic.org. Peace.